This is Peter Sullivan, Adult Services Librarian at the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. Today is Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, and I will be interviewing retired Air Force Colonel, real estate entrepreneur, and Falls Church resident, Colonel Lawrence Pence. This interview is taking place at Meridian High School in Falls Church, Virginia, and is part of the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library Oral History Project. Hello, Colonel Pence. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to do this interview for us.
My pleasure.
All right, well, why don't we get started with your early life? Could you just tell us about it? Where were you born and what was your childhood like?
Well, I was born the 3rd of January, 1939 in Beckley, West Virginia. And my early life was primarily in the northern Ohio section, Akron, and surrounding area. My father was a tire builder, worked for Goodyear, and as you might imagine, the war industry was paramount. Rubber was very important in the aircraft and Army equipment, and was very much, of course, there was no domestic source of rubber. It all had to come from South America or the jungle areas of Eastern Europe, not Europe, but the jungle areas of Africa and so on, and was very much a critical war product. Rubber tires were absolutely unavailable to the populace of the U.S. at that time because of the extreme necessity for wartime. So both my mother and my father worked in the industries. My mother worked for Goodyear Aircraft. You don't think of Goodyear as a tire company, you don't think of them having much to do with aircraft, but in fact they did, with barrage balloons and airships. And Goodyear, that still exists today, and Goodyear Aircraft Corporation still exists. And they have the largest single-span structure in the world, a dirigible dock, a hangar dock, which is looks like a huge loaf of bread turned on its top. The Goodyear Corporation runs that. They still run dirigibles and airships for mostly advertising kind of things now, but that airship dock is so big that it takes 2 hours for the doors to open. They're on railroad tracks that they swing open, two clamshell doors to each end of the dock, airship dock, airdrome, I guess you'd call it. And that thing is so big that it actually clouds up and rains inside the building.
Wow.
Yeah. It's just unimaginably big. And my mother worked in the airship. They were building airships at that time for surveillance in the wartime, and they're still building airships.
So you mentioned your mother. What about your father? Did he also work in the
Oh
tire
yes,
industry?
he was a tire builder.
Okay.
And he got was allowed not to be drafted. He got an exemption, is the word, from the draft, because tire building was an art at that time, and he was very good at it, and very much in demand. He worked for Goodyear for the entire period of the war, and consequently did not have to, was exempt from the draft. My mother, of course, they weren't drafting women at that time, at the same time worked at Goodyear Aircraft in the airship business.
And when we spoke earlier, you had mentioned that your grandfather lived with you. Is that
Yes,
right?
he did. He was a remarkable individual. He was Scots-Irish. McCollum was his given name, or his family name, and had a great many talents. He was worked as a youngster for the Hudson's Bay Company as a trader, paddled a canoe up and down the rivers, trading with the Indians for skins, and was self-taught, very good mathematician. Taught me to read at age 4. And I was an avidly curious as a kid, and wanted to learn to read. And at that time, the public school system would not teach children to read at such an early age, so he undertook to do it. And he was very much adverse to worthless reading, which he considered comic books and that sort of things as that. So my first book was a freshwater marine biology, which I still have, that book. And he taught me to read by teaching me about, or by reading about freshwater fish and freshwater insects and that sort of thing. So, you know, for a 5-year-old, that was really heavy-duty stuff. No Superman and Batman, and I didn't feel that was really any great loss. But my teachers in the public schools were extremely distressed at a non-certified teacher teaching this kid to read in scientific books when Dick and Jane was the so they actually called him in and upbraided him, and he told them where to go. But he was an inventor, and he had a huge family in Virginia, and this was at a time when polio was a very deadly. It was very much similar to this thing we've just recently experienced, except that there was no vaccine, and many young people mostly died of polio, and he lost a son to polio, and was so distressed by this that he invented. The reason that the son died was not necessarily of the disease directly, but affected the muscles that you breathe with, the opening and closing of your lungs. And they lived in a rural area and could not get him to a hospital soon enough to keep him from dying. So my grandfather invented and patented a portable iron lung, which I have pictures of it. I was a test subject on this iron lung to see whether it really was a pump, an air pump that decreased and increased the pressure in a vest, which was strapped over the chest of the subject, and would allow the subject to breathe without the muscles doing the work, which was really a very good analysis of both the mechanics and the structure that he had to deal with, and why that wasn't successful. Those days, the iron lungs were great, huge, looked like a water heater kind of a structure that the subject was sealed in, essentially hermetically sealed in, and were far from transportable. Right. This thing ran on the thing that my grandfather built a working model of, and I actually have pictures of me. I was the test subject. Right. And you could walk around with it. You didn't have to be bedridden, so to speak. And the really useful part of this was that the mechanism itself was transportable. You could throw it in a station wagon or whatever. You didn't have to have a big, huge iron lung like they had in hospitals. And why it never took off, why it never gained any interest is beyond me, because it was something that should have gotten a great deal more exposure, but perhaps he was innocent of advertising or whatever he would have had to do to promote this thing. Mm-hmm. But I always felt that he was cheated somehow by circumstances. But my grandfather was a very bright individual. He had, I think, 7 patents. Oh, wow. In addition to being the patent for the iron lung. But mostly he patented a page-turning. He was a country fiddler, and you can't turn pages in the music from a music stand while you're fiddling, because both hands are taken up. And so he invented and patented an automatic page turner for fiddlers, which also never amounted to a hill of beans. But he did teach me to read.
Can you tell us about the house that you grew up in?
Well, it was a little bitty house in Akron that was way Depression era or before. And after the war, and after my father and mother basically collected or saved their pay from the wartime, we bought about 5 acres in south of Akron, right along the old Ohio Canal Trail, and he built a. My father built a. My grandfather had passed away by that time, so it was just we three. And my father had a nursery and plant business there at that house, and that's where I grew up. It was kind of semi-rural or semi-country, and I could hunt and fish along the old Ohio Canal, which was still there, not operational, of course, but still full of weeds and along the tow paths. The neighborhood boys and I, we never played with girls. Girls were not of interest at that time. In fact, we generally ran them out if they were around. But we had a lot of fun shooting birds with a bow and arrow or BB guns, and just very much like the stories of the Mississippi boys. So that was a good time, very innocent. We got in a lot of trouble, but it was things that we weren't supposed to do. We'd steal our father's cigarettes and collect cigarette butts and strip the paper off and pack them in corncob pipes. I mean, harmless but fun things.
What about your first job? Do you remember what your first job was?
Well, my first job was in the neighborhood, mowing lawns, and that was a lot of fun. But I was very fortunate. High school time, we moved. My parents divorced, and the country place neither could take it alone, so we sold that, and my parents divorced, and we moved into actually Cuyahoga Falls, which is abuts the Akron, so it's basically all one area, all one connected. And so I mowed lawns in the neighborhood. It was a residential neighborhood, houses one after another. And that, we very fortunately lived next door to a civil engineer who had an interest in my model airplanes, and as soon as I got to be old enough to get a work permit, he hired me to work at his engineering company. And it was a good-sized company of civil engineers and architects. And I found that to be fascinating. In the summers, I got to work on the survey crew, and he had contracts to design much of the Ohio Turnpike, and the superhighways were the coming thing. So they re-engineered that, and I got to do a little bit of some of the re-engineering. I got to work on the survey crew. So and then this company got contracts for the Ohio Turnpikes, and I got to work on them. So I got a pretty good. Now this was late high school and early college, which was very welcome for me to be able to to work summers on the survey crew, and the pay was good, $1.50 an hour, top notch.
Can you tell us more about your college years and where you attended college?
Yes. I worked my way through college, something that most kids can't do now. So I decided to look for a program that continued the engineering kind of education that was closer at hand. Kent State was very close to my home in Cuyahoga Falls, but they were a teacher's school, basically, and so someone, and I don't remember who it was, told me that they had a program for aeronautical engineering. Well, actually, they didn't. They had a program for aviation, and that encompassed mechanical stuff for aircraft and pilot training. Aha. So and the tuition was much less than because it was a state-run school. So I went to them, and they said, "Yeah, welcome aboard. We'll take you," because they saw basically the year of engineering preparation, and my interest in it, and I could commute, so I didn't have the dormitory charges and the food charges, and I could afford this, so I took it and graduated from Kent State with a BS. By that time, just the beginnings of the satellite business, and one of the instructors there was a Goodyear aircraft guy that was versed in space kinds of things, and he was an instructor. His name was Cassiopeia. I can remember that by the Cassiopeia's chair, stellar arrangement of stars in the shape of a chair, and that turned out to be a godsend because it was close by, relatively inexpensive, and fascinating stuff. So that was the beginnings of the space program, really, for the nationally, and I came in just at the very beginning of it. So my degree then was aerospace technology, and I was in ROTC at Kent State, and Air Force was interesting to me, and so that's how I went immediately from graduation into the Air Force. I beg your pardon?
With that degree, did you also get your pilot's license?
Yes. Yeah, I got my pilot's license as a student at Kent State. So I went in to the Air Force as a certified civil pilot, single engine land, and figured that I would transition to the Air Force and get pilot training in jet aircraft and fly fighters. I'm slightly nearsighted, and at that time, now, if I had gone into the Air Force today, yes, I could fly with contacts, or the surgery is for changing your eye is quite common, but it wasn't then. And by that time, I had agreed that I could work in the scientific end of space was just brand new, and that was fascinating. So I have 1 year of Russian. So the Air Force looks at me and says, "This kid has got Russian. Nobody speaks Russian. He reads it. Nobody reads Russian. He's an engineer, an aero engineer, who reads Russian. My God, how many of those are there?" So immediately, I didn't do it by deliberately. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
So what did you end up doing then with all your language skills and your training?
Intelligence. What else? You know? And that turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did. I didn't do it deliberately. I didn't do it by decision. I did it because I could. And so my first assignment in the Air Force was Foreign Technology Division of Air Force Systems Command at Wright-Patterson. And I have a funny little story about that. I didn't do this deliberately. It was pure blind luck. The day that I was due to report in to Foreign Technology Division, I had gone down there, and it's at Wright-Patterson in Ohio. I had gone down there preliminarily and rented with a couple of other second lieutenants a little house off the close by, but walking distance, because none of us had vehicles. And so I walked onto the base, Patterson Field, and went to the building that was designated. Was walking up the sidewalk, and there were it was a relatively new building, and in front of the doors were two individuals standing there, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I get a little closer, and one of them has a uniform on. I get a little closer. My God, it's a brigadier general. And I recognized the other one. He was my teacher at Kent State. He was standing there next to this brigadier general whom I didn't recognize, who turned out to be a World War II fighter ace. He was a member of the American Volunteer Group, who were turned in their uniforms in the Air Force for Flying Tiger. He flew the route between Japanese-occupied and U.S.-occupied, trying to think of the southern end of China. They had the nickname Flying Tigers. This guy was an ace. He was short of stature, and that was a good thing because he was flying cramped fighter aircraft, single engine, and he was shot down 3 times, and 2 times he walked out. The 3rd time, he killed his captors. He was captured walking out. He killed his captured with a machete, and then walked out. I mean, how much of a hero can you be? His name was Crookshank, and he was a mean little bastard. He really was. And he was standing at the door of the building that I was reporting into, and right behind him is my professor of astronautics at Kent State, and I really didn't know what to do. So I walked up, and And he said, "Welcome aboard," Cruikshank did. And I thought, this can't be. Generals don't meet second lieutenants at the door of their building. But I had a suspicion that it had to do with Cassiopo, and it did, of course. Ultimately, then, I got to be the general's morning briefer. Second lieutenant doesn't happen, but it was pure blind luck. And I got to do that for a couple of years, and was ventured into other areas in foreign technology. Well, Foreign Technology Division was the premier technical intelligence outfit in the Air Force, and it was I was with them for 6 years altogether in their overseas outfit in Wiesbaden, Germany. After the first tour at Wright-Patterson. But a little aside, when I went in there, I didn't have any security clearances at all, and of course they had to run me through for top secret, and that took some time. So in that interim time, they put me in a library, cataloging, reading and cataloging publications about flying saucers. This period of time there was a big hoorah about flying saucers at that time. All kinds of fraudulent people coming claiming unidentified flying objects. Hysteria, mass hysteria. And of course, Foreign Technology Division has to be cognizant of this. And one of my jobs, one of my sort of hidden duties was trying to figure what kind of motivation the authors of these things had, and whether or not they were for real and credible and so on. And that was a lot of fun. And as it turned out, it colored my reaction to these claims of unidentified flying vehicles for a long time. A lot of wind has gone through the bugle since then, and I'm not so sure anymore as I was then that this is all BS. There may be something to it, but that's neither here nor there. But having sort of a compatriot in the general's office, of having Dr. Cassiopa there did not hurt me at all. One day, a guy came running into the library and said, that the president had been shot, Kennedy. And, my God, the president has been shot. Are we going to war? I mean, what's happening? And of course, we were all uniformed officers. We were looking at being in the front lines of whatever was going on. Just at that point, there was some talk around the assignees at the library. We heard the cartridge sorters going off on Patterson Field. Our little building was right along the flight line of Patterson Field. My God, the bombers, the SAC bombers, they're revving up their engines. And down our little building was right on the flight line. So we were, well, it was close by the flight line, so we could see the runway. And the C-135s, refuelers were taking off en masse. Pretty soon, the B-52s are rolling down the runway, nose to tail practically, max performance takeoff. What does this mean? It means they're going to their hold points. Curtis LeMay, the chief of SAC, basically ran his own Air Force, Strategic Air Command. He had the authority to go to DEFCON 1, which is war. But he couldn't go past hold points just outside the U.S. boundaries. He could take his airplanes there on his own authority, and he did. But he could not send them to Russia. Only the president can do that. And fortunately, the president didn't, or we would have had, when Kennedy was shot, we would have gone to war. We did go to war as far as SAC was concerned, but we didn't. And it's a damn good thing we didn't. But you can imagine the pandemonium on an Air Force base that is a SAC base. It was Katie bar the door. We didn't know what the hell was happening. And I thought, maybe joining up with this outfit wasn't the best thing I ever did, the smartest move I ever made. But as it turned out, Washington put a brake on Curtis LeMay, which he didn't like. He wanted to go, but he didn't. Anyhow, that's what we did for my first 3 years. I got to be the morning briefer for the general, and that was fascinating, and it was a real quick learning session into the intelligence business. And from there, it was one after another intelligence assignment. Germany, that was really great, really very good. Vietnam, that wasn't so good, but it was a good learning experience. And so forth.
And can you tell us about your experience during the Vietnam War?
Yes, I was assigned to 7th Air Force, which was the major Air Force component in Vietnam. Aside from that was the bombing component, the fighter component was mostly in Thailand, although we did have fighters in Vietnam. And my job was in the current intelligence department at 7th Air Force headquarters in Saigon. And that was firemen, essentially. Whenever a situation came up that was hot, we called it a fire. I got to go find out what was happening and either do something about it, which was almost impossible, or come back and tell the brass not to sweat it. And that brought me all over the war periods, essentially. Once into North Vietnam, which we had shot down a North Vietnamese airplane that we were pretty sure had some electronic equipment on it that we very badly wanted. And I was going to parachute in, but nobody in his right mind parachutes into a jungle because of the trees. You get hung up in the trees, and that's a death sentence. So they put me in a helicopter, and I went down through the trees and on a cable hoist, with a helicopter above, which in itself is kind of hairy, but not nearly as hairy as going in on a parachute. So I never did get to do a combat jump, although I had the training to do it. And quite frankly, I'm glad I didn't, because you don't necessarily, there's no secure walking out of something like that. And fortunately, the helicopter was there to pick me back up, which is also important. So that turned out to be, it turned out that the piece of, the shot down airplane did have the piece of electronic gear on it that we wanted, and I was able to get it out, which in and of itself was pure blind luck, and ship it back home. And it turned out that was a very important piece of equipment, because with it we could interrogate all the North Vietnamese airplanes, and they would tell us where they were. This thing was an electronic black box that responded to a radar broadcast. Which, did you ever hear the old radio show, and it was on TV, of cops patrolling in a big city, and they were forever goofing off, and the dispatcher would say, "Car 57, where are you?" And they would come back and say, "We're at 12th and Vine," or whatever. Well, this thing was that. The radar would interrogate the aircraft, not the pilot, but the aircraft, with a device that read the beep beeps. "Where are you?" And they would come back with back to the radar, the ground controllers, of where they were, because the Russian and North Vietnamese fighter pilots didn't like their lot in life all that much, and they had a bad tendency to defect. And this way, the ground controllers could figure out which ones were likely to defect and ask them where they were. And so if we had that device, we could ask them where they were, and they wouldn't know it. And that made a big difference in the whole air war in Vietnam, because that way we knew where the bad guys were, and they didn't know we knew. Very useful.
And what about your experience in Germany?
I was very fortunate in having had the German language training that I had in college, because not all that many newbies had German. And so I got put on our detachment, Foreign Technology Division, as the contact for defector interrogation. And CIA ran the defector interrogation show, but they weren't always all that interested in sharing with the Air Force. You know, there's a little competition between CIA and the service air components. So I got to be the liaison to the Defector Reception Center, so I could find out what defectors were available for exploitation, and that was very useful and very good, and it got a lot of really interesting defectors and interesting information. Also, got to go to all kinds of places where things were happening that were of interest, like crashed aircraft and other such things all around Europe and North Africa. Got to go and spend several weeks after the Six-Day War between Israel and the Arab countries. There was a Russian relatively new MiG aircraft, fighter aircraft shot down that we were very interested in the engine for. And believe it or not, I went and got that engine and shipped it back to the United States. It was a kind of a hairy exercise. It was out in the middle of the desert, and you know, you don't just go pull an engine out of a crashed aircraft without a whole bunch of help. So I had to make arrangements with the Arabs. And that was interesting.
I believe it. Can you tell us about when you started working in real estate in Northern Virginia?
Well, that was just when we came from Germany, just with a brand new wife and brand new life. I was interested in Old Town Alexandria just as an interest, having a grandfather who was a carpenter, and having done a little bit of that sort of thing before going into the Air Force. So there was this building in Old Town right down at the end of Duke Street, the very first house on Duke Street, 110 Duke, that was on a lot surveyed by George Washington. I have the survey plat, George Washington's signature on it.
Wow.
He didn't build it, but it was a row house that was late 1700s, early 1800s. Had been refacaded from the old brick to a more attractive brick, and was empty. Took a year, lots of weekends and after work at the Pentagon down to Old Town. But we got it done and did a good job and sold it. And I did 3 or 4 other renovations in Old Town. But the biggie was I found an apartment building in Old Town that just at the north end of Old Town that was relatively new and in relatively good condition, really didn't need a lot of work. And having just come from California, I knew a little bit about condominiums. And so I went to my bank, Burke and Herbert, and said, there's this office building, or not office building, apartment building. It's got 8 units, 4 on the top floor, actually 3 on the bottom floor, and where the 4th one would be was commons area for laundry and so on. Very well built, and in looking at it, I looked along the side of the building, and lo and behold, there are 8 electric meters and 8 gas meters. My God, this thing's got separately metered utilities. This is perfect for condominiums, because one of the big problems with condominiums was joint intelligence, or joint services, electricity and so on. That was one of the really not very nifty things that condominiums typically had in California. And there was always a fight about who uses more electricity than the other. So I went to my bank and said, I want to buy this building for condominiums. And David Burke says, there's no such thing as a condominium in Virginia. But go see my lawyer. His lawyer was Henry Thomas. Thomas Kent, Haddock and Sewell, the oldest law firm in Virginia, right there in Old Town. And Henry Thomas was, I went to see him, and he said, I'm a legislator. Virginia has only meets in the summertime, and they have part-time legislators. And he said, I'm doing the condominium law for Virginia. He said, go ahead and buy the building. By the time you get it done, there'll be condominiums, and you'll have no competition. So I did. And the owner of the building was fed up with not having too much repair stuff and not enough people paying their rent on time. So he was willing to vacate the whole building. So I put these 3 kids in the building as renovators and guards, they did a bang-up job, a very nice job. That the apartments were, or the condos were very well done and very attractive and safe, because the kids were there, and they'd call the cops if there were problems, and they did several times. So I put a little ad in the weekly newspaper to the effect of, my lawyer set the condominium code on the table at the meeting in the summertime and said, here are the first condominiums in Virginia. And so I put a little ad in the paper, thinking that I'd get, half a dozen people coming to look at the condominiums. And my God, I had a line of people, like 20 people standing in line to see these things. Sold them all on the first day.
Wow.
Which was, I sold them too cheap. But I don't care, I made money on it.
When did you decide to buy Shadow Lawn?
My wife had been complaining about our little house in Arlington being too small. And I said, I think I found our bigger house. And we all piled into the station wagon and drove over to look at Shadow Lawn, what was then Whitehall, sanatorium, boarded up, falling down, obviously unoccupied, and for sale. Actually, it really wasn't for sale, it was sold. But the city wasn't about to let it be, it had lots of room, which is what my wife wanted. As it turns out, I think there's 34 rooms, 8 baths. It was a nursing home, but it was boarded up because you can't have a nursing home in a wood frame building because of the risk of fire. And I walked around it and thought, my God, this is really a project. And then I got a call from L.F. Jennings. Yeah, I think you probably have heard of him. He's a big builder in Falls Church. He wanted to build his office building on the property that he now has it on, which had the Crossman House on it. Crossman was a big early benefactor of Falls Church, Crossman Church, and others. That whole area there where Jennings' building is was Crossman Farm. In fact, the area where Shadow Lawn is was on the Crossman Farm. He wanted to tear the Crossman House down. The city wouldn't let him. Absolutely no, it's not going to happen, because he was really a big early benefactor. So then he called me and said, I'll give you the Crossman House if you'll move it. And I said, well, he had heard that I had bought the property that I had and was going to do a subdivision there. So, you know, it's not illogical that might cross his mind. So I called a house mover who had made a bundle of money buying or getting them for free houses when the interstate and the Beltway went around there. So he was Northern Virginia and multi-millionaire. He's a millionaire. He showed me some of the stuff that he had done, which was quite remarkable. And he took a look at the Crossman House and said, you know, piece of cake, we can do this. And so I made the arrangements, and we did it. We moved the Crossman House to right next door to Shadow Lawn and put it on the first house before the subdivision was built out or built up. There wasn't even an access road, but in in cooperation and assistance from the city, because they were extremely happy to see the Crossman House saved, and they were happy with the subdivision anyway, because that was within the what the master plan had, was single family in there, and the idea of 10 custom single families beat the idea of cookie cutter. So the whole thing came together, and I'm quite happy that it worked out as it did.
So how has you moved to Falls Church in 1983, and now it's 2023? How has it changed in the time?
Oh, it was a sleepy little place at first, but my wife loved it, and I didn't have any. I liked it too. It had a small town atmosphere. Now times have changed. I saw it, I think, intuitively. This thing is a jewel, and it's right in the middle of a burgeoning ecosystem, if you want to call it that. And sure enough, that has happened. I mean, the Beltway and the improvements that were made in the early times have blossomed the area, and my God.
You were part of the effort to save the State Theater in Falls Church, is that
Well,
right?
early on, yes. When we first bought the what is now Shadow Lawn, which was the old nursing home, there were a number of people, and young people mostly, who had some interest in saving it. It was not viable, commercially viable as a movie theater any longer. And there was some talk of tearing it down and replacing it with some kind of commercial property. And some younger people, I guess I could include myself in that because I was somewhat younger than 40 years ago, decided or felt that some sort of commercial venue, but artsy, would be welcome, and indeed it was, and they do that now. Supper club kind of thing. It has been successful, and it saved an old building. Now, I'm not going to take any credit for having doing anything but dog work, helping with it. Others had the concept and did the upfront stuff.
Would you say that you enjoyed living in Falls Church?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't have done better. It's in many respects, well, it's been very good to me and my family. But I can't think of any place that I could have had the same good time and success that I have had here.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Colonel Pence.
Oh, I'm very happy to do it. Happy to have had the opportunity to wear my uniform again for God knows how many years, and it fits.